afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session of UP Manila Silab IOL 101 Webinar Series 2025. I'm Gabby Velasquez, and I will be your host for today's webinar session. So we at UPM Silab, if you watch the video, we envision achieving universal health coverage through digital health capacity building and of course, appropriate use of digital health technology. That's why this year, we're bringing you fresh topics, diving deep into the latest trends and challenges of digital health and interoperability. So I'm inviting you all to join our weekly webinar session happening every Wednesday. So last week with Sir J.R. Pingol, we learned about DOST FNRI's ICT program and the establishment of the IFNRI website and its six major components where it provides virtual avenues, bridging the gap between the better informed and less informed on diet and nutrition. And this week, it's another crucial and very timely topic to unravel because in today's digital world, protecting patient data is more important than ever. And of course, this session, we want to equip you with knowledge and tools that safeguard sensitive information and maintain the high standards of confidentiality, learn about the best practices, the latest threats and vulnerability, and the practical tips to strengthen your cybersecurity defenses as a healthcare professional. But before we proceed with the session proper, let me just go over the house rules very quickly. So this session is already being recorded, and by proceeding with the meeting, you are consenting to be recorded. May I request everyone to kindly stay muted throughout the lecture, and a virtual background has been provided to your emails already, so turning on your camera is very much appreciated. We also encourage everyone to please change your name for proper identification, and please add your affiliation beside the name for proper recognition. Of course, we want this session to be engaging and interactive. So later after the lecture, there will be a Q&A portion. So please feel free to ask your questions and you may do so by using the raise hand function if you want to ask live, or you may type in your questions in the chat box, or if you want to ask anonymously, you may use the Q&A button for that. And then please do not leave the session after the Q&A as we will be having our group photo. And lastly, after the webinar, please don't forget to answer the evaluation form to receive your electronic certificates of participation. All right? Before we move on and proceed with the session, I invite virtually our lab manager, Sir Manu Gaspar, to briefly introduce UP Manila Silab's community of practice to the group. Over to you, Sir Manu.
Thank you, Gabby, and hello to everyone. Magandang hapon or good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. For our community of practice members, thank you so much for joining. Next week, you'll receive our February newsletter that lists down highlights on standards and interoperability here in the Philippines and in the Asia Pacific region. We have upcoming activities for you in the following weeks, so please stay tuned and keep introducing yourselves or ideas in our WhatsApp group chat. And for those who are not yet members, please join our 120 plus strong group of experts and practitioners, all passionate about advancing standards and interoperability in healthcare. Everyone is welcome. I'll be pasting the link shortly so you can sign up to receive our newsletter and join our WhatsApp group. Or you can also scan the QR code on screen. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Sir Manu, and I hope to see you guys there in our WhatsApp group. So now, may I introduce our speaker for this session of IOL 101. Okay, hold on. Okay, so our speaker, Dr. Alvin Marcelo, is a general and trauma surgeon by training. He has over 25 years of experience both in the field of informatics and academic surgery. He is a director-treasurer of Asia eHealth Information Network, convener of the AHIN Community of Interoperability Labs, or AHIN COIL, and is the president of the Philippine Society for Digital Health and director at the Asia Open RAN Academy. At the University of the Philippines, Manila, Doc Marcelo held various posts, such as the director of the National Telehealth Center and chief of the Medical Informatics Unit at the UP Manila College of Medicine. He also co-established the Master of Science in Health Informatics program and conducted local and international research in the field of e-health and health information systems development. All right, without further ado, to present cybersecurity for health practitioners or professionals, let us virtually welcome UPM Silab's very own director, Dr. Alvin Marcelo. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Manu. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. As Gabby mentioned, this is the fifth for 2025. We have an archive, so please feel free to connect to our website or ask Gabby or Manu where the previous archives of the recordings are. Today, we're going to talk about cybersecurity for health professionals. And then next week, we're going to talk about cybersecurity for health organizations. We decided to have two separate topics because each one will have a quite a wide berth of topics to cover. So maybe for the people who are new to Silab, give me 30 seconds to tell you more about who we are and why we were formed. Our vision is achieving universal health coverage through digital health capacity building in the Philippines. The problems that we are trying to solve is the problem of non-interoperability, and there are many reasons why our systems are not interoperable. Um, Previously, our hypothesis was we need technology to solve this problem. But recently, we realized that really it's about people, people who know the technology and how to use them properly. That is really the secret to interoperability. Just having the technology will not actually be enough. We have to have the right people who are willing to work together, collaborate with people in other side of the fence, and create interfaces that are open but also secure. Our mission is very simple: make sure that the right data is available to the right people, whether that's the patient or the provider, at the right place and at the right time. And this should be secure to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive personal information. We adhere to the health data principles. So we always start our webinars with our uh, health data governance principles on protecting people, promoting health value, and prioritizing equity. Whatever solutions we design in the group or amongst the community of practice, we should stick to these principles. Process-wise, the World Health Organization has already provided a framework on how to convert existing manual systems into electronic formats. They call it the SMART guidelines. We hope to introduce this in the country to DOH, PhilHealth, and also to the different hospitals in the country. We adopt the Open Health Information Exchange framework. The Department of Health and PhilHealth also adopted this. It's a very simple framework. It will be covered by another talk, but just wanted to show you that there are already frameworks that are available for us to use to create interoperable systems. We summarize the products and services that we do into the 5 T's. The first T is teaming. We bring people together so that they have an understanding of what needs to be done to make the different systems interoperable. Number two, after they have an agreement, then they work to build the tools, the tooling, so that they can create the interfaces and the APIs and the databases that are interoperable with each other. Then once they have done the tools, then they train the electronic medical record developers and also the end users on how to properly use these new tools. Then we do testing. And in the testing, we can prove to ourselves that the data is being exchanged securely. And then finally, once we have developed a closed loop of exchange between facilities, then we do a transfer of what we have developed back to the government because they have the mandate for standards dissemination in the country. Currently, our stakeholders are the Department of Health, the OST, PhilHealth, and the ICT. So our topic today is cybersecurity for health professionals. Um, I will be presenting a lot of technologies in my presentation, but I have no financial interests in any of them. So as we all know, I'm sure because we're now using Zoom and everyone has a cell phone, sometimes two or three cell phones, we are increasingly becoming reliant on digital systems in healthcare. If you go to a hospital or to a clinic, just look around and you will see there's the receptionist has a computer, maybe a laptop, a printer. Then when you enter the doctor's clinic, they will have this point of care systems, portable ultrasound, digital stethoscopes. Sometimes they would have a X-ray in the clinic. They will have this electronic fundoscopies and a lot of tools running around in the different facilities. And all of these are collecting very, very sensitive personal data about our patients. So as we become reliant on these digital systems, this Internet of Medical Things, we are also being exposed to the risks of breach of confidentiality. Of course, as health professionals, we all have legal and ethical obligations to protect the sensitivity of our patient data. No, we took an oath, and that's part of our PRC license, so to speak, that we understand our obligations to our patients to keep their privacy, private information confidential. Unfortunately, the cyber attacks are increasing and they are targeting the healthcare organizations. Why? Many reasons. We'll have more details of that next week, but uh, overall, a lot of the healthcare organizations have old systems. They have legacy systems that are not updated, they are not patched. Um, Security is not foremost in the mindset of the people inside a healthcare organization. They want to serve the patients, and sometimes when you want to serve the patient, you want the data to be easily accessible, and then you make compromises on the security of your information systems. Many, many reasons. But to define cybersecurity, let's just focus on what we call the CIA. A secure system ensures that there's confidentiality, meaning protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access. So if the patient is the first party and I am the doctor, I'm the second party, the data that the patient gives to me should be kept confidential. That is my responsibility as their provider. Because I'm working inside the hospital, that confidentiality is also inherited by the facility where I am working. The data that is collected about these patients, if they're collected electronically, should be kept, there should be integrity, and therefore that means maintaining the accuracy and the completeness of data inside the electronic system. There's no malicious manipulation of the data without authorization from myself or the other members of the care team. A is availability, where you ensure reliable access to information only for the authorized users. So CIA is the minimum criteria for cybersecurity of electronic systems, not just for healthcare systems, but for information systems in general. Unfortunately, the Philippines is the fifth most attacked online worldwide. No, there's the data from Kaspersky, and there are many, many vectors or reasons why the attacks are happening. There's malware, there's phishing, there's ransomware, there's social engineering, and there are insider threats. So let's go through them one by one. The vulnerabilities are because of the human weaknesses. No, we have passwords, but we use very common passwords that are easy to guess. So the top most used password in the Philippines is admin. Okay. Uh, the admin password actually are embedded sometimes out of the box in these wireless access points that you buy in the mall. So when you set them up at home and you turn them on and you don't change the password, the default password there is admin. Sometimes software uh, we need to be updated, and we don't know how to update them because we're clinicians, we're health workers, we're not IT people, so they are left unpatched. And because they are left unpatched, the people who know how to take advantage of the outdated software can easily exploit these outdated systems. The third is really the most important, and that's why we're offering this webinar, is that there is a lack of awareness of the users on what are their minimum responsibilities and accountabilities when it comes to protecting uh, the IT system of the organization. They might think that's not my responsibility because there's an IT department, there's an information security department. But in reality, the users, the doctors, the nurses, the midwives, the therapists, we are the end users of the system. And if we do not behave properly, we could be the reason these perpetrators are able to enter our organization's IT system. So the lack of awareness, I think, is the most dangerous of all the weaknesses and vulnerabilities. You don't know this, but actually your patient data is very much valued on the black market. The reason is patient data correlates very well with also the financial data of the person. When people open bank accounts, they give out their personal information, of course, address, they will put their birthdays, they will put their maybe SSS, TINs, GSIS numbers. Uh, but when they are able to, when the perpetrators are able to access sensitive health information, they are able to pretend and take on the personality of another person because the health information provides them with a lot of information that can make them uh, uh, take on the personality of a patient. So to think that patient data is not valuable is wrong. Patient data is very, very valuable in the US. A lot of hackers, they are really targeting hospitals and getting patient data. 34% of healthcare organizations do not recover their patient data from attackers after a ransomware attack. And healthcare services and healthcare organizations, and we'll discuss this more next week, they cannot close the hospital. No, they want to make sure that the hospital is always running, the data is always accessible, and therefore they are more likely to pay ransoms. So the perpetrators know that, the threshold of hospitals are very low. Magbabayad na yan because they just want to make sure that the patient care proceeds as usual. Again, if you go to the hospitals, look around, there's a lot of technologies already. And these devices are collecting patient information and sharing data of these patients between each other. This increased connectivity creates a greater surface area for vulnerability and also attacks. So for every device that enters a facility, you might want to ask the question, what data is it collecting? Is it secure? Is it sharing it with a entity outside of the hospital? Is it encrypted? And these things are really the reasons why healthcare organizations are easy targets for the perpetrators. So what are these common cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities? Um, One of them is phishing, where the perpetrators try to deceive you by tricking you to click on a link. No, they send you a almost realistic email, uh, sometimes scaring you that you have to do it now and click on the link. And these are links that appear like they are legitimate, but once you click them, what happens is you're actually it's like opening the door to your device to the perpetrator, and therefore they can now access all of the data that you have inside your system. Worst case is they can install keyboard logger inside your device, and they can now record all of the key keystrokes that you do, including the passwords when you log into your mobile bank accounts. They can see your username and the password that you type because they were able to install this keylogger into your device. There are many ways to detect phishing. In general, if you are getting messages from unfamiliar senders, when the message is urgent or threatening, or there are misspellings or suspicious links that you do not recognize, assume that that is a phishing attack. Do not click on that link. Globe and Smart have been trying to prevent this already within their system. I think Globe has been successful. There are no more hyperlinks with messages coming from Globe, but for Smart, there are still some messages. But this is difficult um, because sometimes there are ways the perpetrators are still able to send you links. In general, I really recommend not clicking links sent by SMS. On email, that's harder. You might want to look at the sender. If it's somebody that you know, that's better than from somebody that you don't know. If it's from somebody that you know, look at the body of the message. Is it credible or it's not credible? Sometimes the perpetrators are able to hack into the accounts of your friends, and therefore it appears like the message is coming from your friend, but actually it is not anymore coming from your friend because their accounts have been compromised. In general, do not click links. It is safer not to click links. So, three rules to avoid phishing. Number one, stop and think before clicking any link or attachment. Number two, if things look fishy, verify with the sender through a different medium. Yeah, you can send them a Viber message or a WhatsApp message and ask them, did this really come from you? Number three, when in doubt, throw it out. Don't click it. Because once you click it, you're basically opening the door from the inside and the perpetrators will be able to come in. Another type of bad software are malwares. These are software that try to blackmail you. Those are ransomware. They steal your data or spyware. They spam you with ads. Uh, there are also worms that spread across computers. There are Trojans and there are botnets. So in general, don't click links because they are uh, going to be the way this bad software are going to enter your system. Thank you. So preventing malware, there are many techniques how to prevent malware from taking over your devices. There's a use of multi-factor authentication. Again, avoiding the suspicious links, adjusting your email security settings, making sure that you have a backup file of your important files. Make sure your devices are updated, and then removing malicious downloads when you are able to detect them. Ransomware, how it works. So usually you receive the malware to your spam, and then when you click it, because you clicked it, the malware downloads into your device. The malicious code will then encrypt your files, and then you will receive a ransom notice with a deadline on when you should pay and how much. And then you pay a ransom, and then you get back your data. Of course, our recommendation is not to pay because that will just continue the cycle. They will say, oh, this person pays, so let's hack him again, and he will pay again. So you just have to bite the bullet sometimes and not pay. And that's why you need backups because the backups will be your way to recover your data even if they become encrypted. So actually, you will see that it becomes the same recommendations. No? Don't click on links, scan your email, make sure that you have protections, notify users when you receive emails from outside of your network, keep your backups and protect your information. Social engineering is very hard to avoid. You have to be more on the paranoid side to detect if somebody is trying to convince you to divulge some confidential information. In general, if you don't know the person, hang up and don't talk to the person. They have no business talking to you and asking you for sensitive data about your patients, your usernames, and your passwords. I guess that's very clear. But that's actually what happens. Somebody will call you, pretend that they are from the IT department, and that you have to do this, you have to do that, and finally, they are able to get information from you. In Filipino, we call it budol, no? Nabubudol because they're actually very convincing. So be careful. The only way you can avoid this is if you put yourself in paranoid mode and assume that they are not actually from your department. You don't know them personally, and therefore you should not be giving them confidential information. How do you prevent social engineering? Stay informed about the latest attacks. Implement multi-factor authentication. Always verify identity and legitimacy. If you need to hang up the phone and call their supervisor or call somebody in the IT department and ask. Enable anti-spam filters. On the right side are the things IT department can do for you. They will install firewalls, give you antivirus software, update with the latest security patches. They will conduct penetration testing amongst themselves, and they will also send you some phishing messages to see if you will succumb to the phishing messages, and also the security encryption certificates are updated on the website. Insider threats are the most difficult because they are actually legitimate workers inside your organization performing illegitimate actions. So they actually have access inside the organization. They are employees, co-employees, maybe sometimes your bosses, you know. They're careless, they are disgruntled, and sometimes they are your outsourced parties. No, you outsource your call center to an outside group, and they will be the source of your insider threat. Very difficult. Again, there are solutions for this like zero trust systems. But in general, make sure that there's policy on what are allowed and not allowed in terms of behavior of these insiders, and make sure that they're following the rules and policies of the organization. Prevention is identify the insider threats, investigate if they're behaving suspiciously, and prevent similar actions from happening again. So let's look at some best practices for cybersecurity in healthcare. On the left side are security non-experts top online safety practices, use of antivirus, use strong passwords, change passwords frequently, only visit websites that you know, don't share personal information. On the right side are the recommendations of the security experts. Install software updates, use unique passwords, use two-factor authentication, use strong passwords, and use a password manager. On the right is Ubico. It's a YubiKey created by the Ubico company. This is my preferred technology for multi-factor authentication. I also use my cell phone to get one-time passwords, but I recently learned that these one-time passwords can also be compromised. So the Ubico or YubiKey or FIDO system are hardware type of multi-factor authentication. So they're like USB devices. You plug them into your hardware, your device, your laptop, your phone, and then they create a unique code only for that session, which is very, very hard for hackers to simulate and copy because the code actually changes every time. Uh, I have two of those, and I gave one also to Manu to make sure that we use it for our very sensitive transactions. We also need to talk about access control, less for the health professionals because all we need to do is just log in and do what we need to do with our email and electronic medical record. Next week, we will have a more detailed discussion about things that organizations should be doing, such as access control, data encryption, data backup. Organizations must do the backup for the organization, and the backup that you do for yourself are just for yourself in your USB drives. Be careful that when you back up, that you're backing up with the proper authorities, that you have the proper authorization to maintain a copy of that backup file. Because if you don't have authority to maintain patient records in your USB drive, don't do that because that USB drive will then become a liability for the organization. But if it is your personal file, then you can do the 3-2-1 backup rule. Maintain at least 3 copies of your data. 2 copies of these are stored at separate location, and at least 1 copy at an off-site location. Okay. Again, for the organization's IT department, patching vulnerabilities. They will discuss this more next week. automating updates. But this one, if you have a personal laptop, you might want to make sure that your operating system is updated as well. If it's a company-owned laptop or device, they will take care of that for you. Firewall, that's beyond the healthcare professional, and this is really within the domain of the healthcare organizations. Secure Wi-Fi networks are also organizational, but at home, I'm sure you have your own home Wi-Fi networks. I think the recommendation is still to use encryption methods. Make sure that you activate your the firewall feature in your router. Make sure that you have a good SSID. Don't have to show it to everyone. Utilize virtual private networks and deploy security, wireless security software. There's an open microphone, Gabby. Network segmentation is an organization feature. This will be discussed next week. Physical security are care of the organization, less the healthcare professional. Incident response is more organizational, but we have a responsibility if we detect something anomalous or abnormal. I think it is our responsibility to report it to the IT department or to our direct supervisor. Don't keep it to yourself. If you find something fishy or anomalous, please report to your supervisor or to the IT department. Very, very important. The earlier you report and you are in the right direction, it will actually prevent the expansion and spread of the malware. Training and awareness are very, very important. Again, the human resources department is in charge of this. If they are not doing this, please tell them, please train me so that I can perform my job correctly. No, it's not practical to expect everyone to know cybersecurity. There must be formal cybersecurity training given to all people entering the organization and inside the organization at least once a year. So here are some resources. You might want to look at the DICT's National Cybersecurity Plan. They released it last year, but this is dated 2023 to 2028. And you might want to join industry organizations like cybersecurity.ph. No, they have a lot of resources in their website that you can tap. And these are just me. These are my personal tips. We have about 20 minutes left. These things have worked very well with me, and I hope you can also adopt them. We'll open the floor after my discussion. I'll ask people in the audience to also share their personal tips. For me, turning on the pattern, face recognition, and fingerprint recognition access to the phone is very important because if you lose your phone, this will protect you uh, from any breaches from somebody who picks up your phone. No, if you don't put this pattern, face and fingerprint recognition, or even your passcode, then it's like everyone will now have access to your photos, your email, and everything that's running on your phone. Then you'll be at risk until you report to Globe or to Smart to deactivate that number. Even then, even if you deactivate your phone number, they already have access to the hard drive in your phone. So please make sure that there's a barrier for people who are not yourself from accessing the data in your phone. This is a new one. I used to use the same email address for everything, for my mobile banking, for my email, for logging into websites. And then I was able to have a discussion with a cybersecurity expert, and he said, accounts have at least three barriers: the email address, the password, and then the multi-factor authentication. But why give away the first access? If they know your email address, then that's basically giving away the first of the three barriers, no? So what I have done personally, and of course it's up to you if you will follow it, is I changed all of my mobile bank accounts from alvin.marcelo@gmail.com to another email account that only me knows and the bank. And that will make it harder for people to second guess, no? They don't before they don't have to guess my username and my email address because it's so public, but now they'll have to guess also my email address, which is specific for each bank. Please use long passwords. The longer the password, the better. It doesn't have to be very difficult to remember. I have an example here. Please don't follow this anymore. Like Leron Leron Sinta, buko ng papaya, and then I replace the letter O with a zero, and then the letter Y to an A. So it's up to you. The longer, the better. Long passwords are really very difficult to guess. There are a lot of password guessing software out there right now. And if your password is very short, less than six characters, it can be guessed, I think, in less than 24 hours with that password guessing software. So the longer your password, the harder it is for password guessing software to guess your password. Can you imagine if you're using your usual email account and then your password is very short? It's like giving away your identity to the perpetrators. And of course, the multi-factor authentication, of course, you can use your phone as usual. But if you can also have a hardware uh, multi-factor authenticator like a Ubico, that will increase the barrier to the people who have evil intents to your identity and to your accounts. Many cybersecurity tools out there. Up to you what you want to use. We're not endorsing any of these brands, but you should have antivirus. And if you can use a password manager, please use a password manager. A password manager allows you to um, maintain a master password that's very, very long, as I recommended. But for every website, the password manager actually uses a different password, and therefore it's really very difficult for the evildoers to guess what password you're using for every website that you visit. Finally, please don't forget, next week we will talk more about cybersecurity for healthcare organizations. And again, inviting you to the CLAB community of practice. Cybersecurity is part of the interoperability framework that we are proposing. We think that one of the reasons interoperability is difficult is because we don't trust each other. We don't trust the cybersecurity uh, procedures in another facility. And therefore, that's the reason why I'm not going to share my data with you. I don't know if you're actually secure in your systems. Why would I share my data with you? So we're starting with cybersecurity because unless all of us have a minimum understanding of what are our responsibilities as healthcare practitioners and what are the responsibilities of healthcare organizations, even if we have highly sophisticated technology between two ends, we will still not exchange data with each other because we don't trust the security of our respective systems. So we're starting this year with a lot of talks on cybersecurity. I'm sure there will still be a lot of questions and I don't know, mistrusts about the quality of security in the different facilities. I hope that this is the start of our discussions, how we can trust each other. What proof do we need to show to another organization that our healthcare practitioners are secure? They're not clicking on links. They're not sharing their passwords. They're using very strong and long passwords. So these things are, I'm putting them on the table. I'm not saying that we are all secure today, but if we can agree on the minimum behavior and the minimum security posture of healthcare practitioners and healthcare organizations, I think that will do well in moving forward and achieving a future where we can trust each other. I can trust another healthcare practitioner. I Another facility can trust another facility, and we can create this environment where we can actually exchange health data without suspecting that another entity is taking advantage of the data of our patients and breaching the confidentiality that our patients gave to us. So I'll pass the floor back to Gabby And before that, inviting you February 26, Professor Susan Festin, in the from the UP Diliman Computer Security Group will be talking about cybersecurity for healthcare organizations. Gabby, back to you.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Alvin, for that very informative lecture. So, of course, as well as the personal tips that you've provided us. So, again, just a reminder to everyone, the minimum requirement of a secured system is the CIA. So, we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And now I'm opening the floor. Wait, let me just share back my screen. All right, so now I'm opening the floor to question and answer. So again, you have three options to ask your questions. You can either use the raise hand function if you want to ask live. You may type in your questions in the chat box, or you can ask anonymously using the Q&A button. So are there any questions from the group? Let me check. Okay. So, hi, Doc Alvin. Here's a question regarding cybersecurity training. So, they're currently using Cisco Net Acad Resources and Certification Prep. Is that okay, or do they need other resources as well, like ISACA? So, I apologize, I'm not very well versed with these resources, but maybe Doc Eloy.
Yeah, Gabby, thank you. Yeah, Cisco has a very good set of courses. No, you take the course, and then when you pass the course, you get a certificate. I strongly recommend the Cisco NetAcad resources. I think it's also accessible at skillsforall.com or .org. No, I think for end users, to me, that is sufficient, Rodel. That is sufficient. However, if you are in the IT department, we expect more from the IT department. No, the Cisco Net Acad might not be enough. No, they have other courses there that you can take. Isaka is a very good course. I recommend that. They have risk, they have value, and they have COVID 2019. Previously, COVID 5. No, so for users, okay na sa akin yung Cisco Net Acad Skills for All. Of course, open the floor and the chat box for any other suggestions for certifications. I think for end users, okay na sa akin yung Cisco Net Acad. For data protection officers, there's a course from National Privacy Commission. For IT department, I think Isaka would be a good source, CISSP, etc., etc. I think IT department must have more courses.
Thank you so much, Doc Alvin. So someone is raising his hand. Yes, Sir Marco Paulo. You may unmute yourself po.
Hello, Sir Doc Alvin.
Go ahead.
Ma'am Gab. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. So, in answering both the questions, okay, sorry. Hello. Hello.
Go ahead, Marco. Go ahead.
Yes.
I cannot. Sorry.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Maybe we can go to Sunny Zacarias muna. Gabi.
Hello. Can you hear na, Doc Alvin?
Yeah,
Yes.
we've been hearing you. Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear you.
yes, yes, sorry. Okay, this is my question for to combine both Sonny Sagarias and Thomas Nicolo Reyes na lang rin questions. So since in the governance, 'di ba, in our hospital, so we cannot trust each other even though ends to ends we will share data. So if me, for example, I am planning to get quality data as a doctor and I'm doing a AI research, for example, because patient data is very like very mataas yung quality for changing the algorithm. So if affiliating from if I will be affiliated to UPMC Lab, will it increase my chance for getting quality data since mahirap to trust systems?
Okay, so Silab, we don't work with real world patient data.
Mm.
We only do synthetic data. We have set up a laboratory on the cloud. We invite our community of practice to join the lab. We are populating it right now with synthetic data, so these are not real world data, where we can do back and forth testing of data exchange.
Okay.
Hopefully, yung mga API that will be created between systems, that will build confidence that the APIs are actually effective. We are not going to use real world data, because once we do that, we take a risk, and the hospital will also take a risk, because we don't have consent from the patient
Yes,
to
yes,
exchange
yes.
data. The only consent that you will get would be from the PhilHealth and DOH, no, when they publish the National Health Data Repository and require the hospital to submit data to the NHDR. That's the time that you will exchange real world data with PhilHealth, so that you can file a claim and you can comply with their requirement. But the API that you will use there, tested na siya in the laboratory of Silab. So you don't need to be afraid that you're exchanging real world data using untested API. That's the goal of Silab. Be a laboratory for testing security, testing data architecture, and testing API. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, at some point, Doc Alvin, you've answered it. So right now, this is very interesting. I'm using synthetic data right now since I cannot get patient data, no? So
Yes,
I'm
yes,
using GANs and literature just to simulate data.
yes.
Since it is very sensitive here in the Philippines, although madali lang talaga. And I get your like sentiments on hospitals, like mabilis lang makuha yung data. So right now, in an ethical way, I do want to I'm very interested in the syllabus approach in synthetic generation because that's what I'm doing right now in my phase of my research. Kasi I'm forced to do synthetic. I'm putting literature from outside sources, categorizing it into the parang mga patient details and using AI to synthesize GANs just to make quality data near as accurate as the patient data. So if if I could go with the UPM syllab, it would be better for my research. And if okay ba yung syllab for as an institution to back it up?
So because we're not doing real world data, we can only help you as much as a synthetic data. The problem with
Yes.
synthetic data, it's not true.
Yes,
So
yes,
any
yes,
any
yes.
AI that you generate from the synthetic data is practically useless,
Yes, yes.
because the data is an input to the machine learning that you feed into the
Yes,
AI
yes, yes, no. Oh,
engine. Um, Maybe for your research, you might want to approach it from the federated learning perspective, like
okay.
OMOP, observational model, outcomes model, observational model outcomes partnership. So that's a different framework, no? Where you have your existing data set, no? You said madali. Sabihin may access ka. I hope that's access that's allowed, ah. If you have access to the allowed data, you map it to the OMOP data model. Dun pa rin inside your hospital, and then you expose the query from the international OMOP group. They have some queries there that you can run internally in your hospital. Uh, that's the approach. But that's interoperability, but that's not the interoperability that we're doing right now. We're doing interoperability straight to PhilHealth muna tsaka DOH, eh. But from the research perspective, I recommend the OMOP approach. Maybe somebody can type OMOP,
Ah,
odc.org.
okay. Thank you, Sir Alvin.
Sure,
It
sure.
helps a lot. Okay. So if ever like I can go in syllab it so if in person. So, if pwede
Yes,
ba
yes,
yun? Yes. I'm
yes,
very
yes, yes, yes.
interested. It's very in synthetic data generation. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Gab.
Thank
So
you
from
so much for that. Yes, Doc Alvin, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just reading the question. Sunny, is there a certifying authority in the Philippines that ensures digital interoperability between two or more facilities? No, there's no certifying authority, and I'm thinking that will take a longer time. It's faster to just form a community of practice. So that's what we're building. It's like a sandbox where different EMR developers can come and do the testing between each other and demonstrate. I think the certifying authority will be DOH and PhilHealth, but I'm not sure if they have the test suites already available. It might take time for them to develop the test suites. And then for Thomas, Dr. Reyes, is censorship of 18 PHI sufficient in accordance to HIPAA when using patient data for research on top of ethics review board, or is this incompatible with the Data Privacy Act? I think the 18 PHI, removing them is not sufficient. You have to get ethical approval when you process data, no? Yun nakalagay sa law. But I think it's just a matter of asking permission and informing your ethics board that this is what you plan to do. Um, and it differs in every health organization, but the ethical guideline already came out from the Philippine Health Research Ethics Board. So you might want to refer to the PHREB Manual of Operations. Meron siyang chapter doon on data management. While FHIR doesn't exactly define row-level security, will using Smart on FHIR address this when exchanging health data? Yes. And what auth or OAuth services are best combined with Smart on FHIR? I'm not sure regarding that. Nakikita ko sa mga discussion OAuth 2, OpenID. Again, we have a lab and we should start testing all of these technologies in the lab so that we can answer these questions more deliberately. Thank you, VJ. From Willie, what is your view on implement security by design in the evolving technologies of LLM AI to use in medical health? Is it safe to use AI in medical research and other relevant ways in health? I think there's a lot of unknowns with AI right now, and therefore my recommendation is to make sure that you have principles of health data governance. You have a methodology for monitoring the provenance of your data from if you're using real patient data to the machine learning to the AI, how are you ensuring that they are protected? And this is new. I don't know the answer to the question. We're looking at the Move system from Yale Meditron. I'm not sure if it's safe, so we have to start asking questions about safety as well. So if you're interested in that, let me know. It is jointhe.move.org. For hospitals like PGH, ano that was hidden. So I'll just answer Julani Estrella Gabi privately.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions in the chat box. Doc, do you still have time to answer one final question?
Sure.
Okay. So, are there any other questions from the group before we end this call? Going once, going twice. Again, reminding everyone to please stay on the topic at hand, cybersecurity and health professionals. Okay. If none, all right. So thank you all for your valuable contributions for today's webinar session. So we've had some fantastic insight and questions from the group. Just reminding you all, if you have other questions not answered earlier, please feel free to contact us, UPM Silab, at Facebook or email us at silab.upm@up.edu.ph. And now, and again, sorry. Again, just reminding everyone that next week we'll be having another session on cybersecurity for healthcare organizations. So please scan the QR code and register if you haven't. We'll be sending the link also shortly. And before we formally end this session, let's have a group photo taken. So may I invite everyone to please turn on their camera and let me just stop sharing my screen so I can capture everyone. Let's take a group photo in 3, 2, 1. So I guess this is what you've all been waiting for. Again, to receive your electronic certificates of participation and for us, of course, to improve our next sessions, kindly answer the evaluation form flashed on your screen. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar session on cybersecurity for health practitioners. Once again, I'm Gabby Velasquez. Thank you all for actively participating. And now it's time to put what we've learned into action. So remember, be vigilant, be informed, and be secure. So have a great day, everyone, and stay safe. See you next Wednesday. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sunny, VJ, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.